Why movement-based strength training will improve athletic performance while reducing injury risk. I'm Aaron Robinette, head coach of Athletic Power and Performance. I help inspire athletes to find their passion, drive, and joy for their sport. Athletic Power and Performance. Don't be a piece, train holistically. In this video, I will cover the difference between isolation strength exercises and movement-based strength exercises. I will discuss why isolation-based strength exercises are problematic for long-term use for athletes. And I will detail how movement-based strength training, when done correctly, will improve athletic performance while also reducing injury risk. Point number 1. The difference between isolation strength training and movement-based strength training. Isolation exercises are exercises that train only a muscle or group of muscles without engaging other parts of the body. This can be done by bracing the body to force the muscle or muscles that are lifting the weight to work harder, or it can be done by reducing the range of motion of the exercise, again to force more output of the muscle or a select group of muscles. Movement-based strength training incorporates all the muscles involved in a particular movement. In these exercises, the only muscles that are not involved are the muscles that have no movement or bracing responsibilities during the particular movement trained. There is less isolation in movement-based strength training and more integration of more muscles involved in the particular movement being trained. The isolation exercises do have their place even for the athletes. This is when the athlete either has a weakness in one muscle or a select group of muscles that need to be strengthened in order for these muscles to work better with the rest of the body, or when the athlete has been injured and isolation exercises are the best choice to allow the athlete to rehabilitate properly. In either case, the time for an athlete to use isolation exercises should be limited to only when these exercises are allowing the athlete to overcome the particular issue that the athlete is dealing with. Point number 2. Why isolation-based exercises are problematic for long-term use for athletes. When an athlete strength trains using primarily isolation training exercises, this reduces the athlete's ability to move effectively. Isolation exercises break the body down into parts. Although these parts do become stronger by isolating them, this strength is only functional in the limited isolated range of motion and only with the same bracing that is provided during the exercise. This bracing is not provided on the playing field for the athlete. This makes the strength training developed during these isolation exercises unusable during competition. For example, if an athlete uses a leg extension machine to strengthen their quads, this develops quad strength as long as the hips are at a 90-degree angle and the legs are braced against a stable object. Once the athlete is standing or moving during their sport, this position with this bracing will not happen. The other issue is that by breaking the body down into these parts, which again is training the muscles in isolation, this does not train these body parts to work together. There is no neural connection between these muscles to now go out and replicate the movements the athlete needs to perform on the field. When an athlete uses movement-based exercises, this forces the body to stabilize the movement and allows all these muscles involved in the movement to work together to perform the exercise. To use the earlier example of training the quads, if the athlete uses a lunge this time to train their quads, the athlete needs to brace his or her body during the movement. The quads are forced to work with the other muscles in the lower body and with the core to perform this exercise. All these active muscles are responsible for either moving the body or bracing the body so the body can move, especially when loaded with weight or other forces. This is much more effective at training the athlete to improve athletic performance. Point number 3. How movement-based exercises are done correctly to improve athletic performance while reducing injury risk. There are 7 primary movement patterns that cover all athletic movements performed in all sports. Every movement an athlete performs during competition has at least some form of one of the following movement patterns, and often more than one of the movement patterns at the same time. A quick note, These movement patterns are Paul Chek's primal movement patterns. For more on Paul's movement patterns, he has resources on his website at chekinstitute.com. The movement patterns are the squat, bend, lunge, push, pull, twist, and gait. Gait has 3 stages, which are walking, jogging, and sprinting. To use the movement patterns to improve athletic performance, you must first determine any deficiency with any of the movement patterns in the athlete. The base level of these movement patterns is primal, which means that the athlete should be able to perform each of the movement patterns with body weight through a full range of motion. Any limitation here means that this is the first step that needs to be addressed for the athlete. The less an athlete is able to perform these movement patterns at a primal level, the less the athlete will be able to perform during competition, and the more risk of injury the athlete faces due to movement compensations. Then you need to understand which movement patterns make up the athlete's particular sport and specific position within the sport. For example, I was a baseball pitcher. The pitcher must lunge, twist, and push to throw the ball over the plate. From this point, you must determine the level of ascension you need for the different movement patterns involved in the sport. To determine the level of ascension, you need to look at the sport for different needs, such as how little base of support there is the movement performed while moving across the center of gravity, if this movement is combined with other movements simultaneously, and if the athlete has any objects or outside forces that exerted onto them during these movements. Again, as a pitcher, I would lunge across my center of gravity while twisting my body and ending the movement with a push from my arm to finish the pitch. I would do this with a relatively light object, which is the baseball, but there should be at least some weight considerations even for a light object like the baseball. Early during the training phase, we'll say late off-season and very early in the preseason, I would have the athlete train all the movement patterns individually to create a base level of strength. As we get later into preseason and the base level of strength is growing, this is where I would start to ascend the movements for the specific sport. The athlete needs to have their training at least at a level of ascension that is performed during competition. I always want my athletes to have a higher level of ability than they need to perform during their sport. The reason for this is as the athlete fatigues, their form and technique is susceptible to breaking down. If you've developed an ability above their needs, this provides them with a cushion to ensure their form and technique will have less chance of breaking down as they fatigue during their competitions. In this video, I'm just scratching the surface of how to remove roadblocks in the athlete's way. For a deeper dive into unleashing the athlete within, get a copy of my book, Athlete Unleashed. Also check out my individual coaching options at athleticpowerandperformance.com. The link is in the description below.